So thank you everybody for joining. This is a GOWME lecture, the Global Organization for Wilderness Medical Medicine Education. This is a part of our lecture series. So this is our mission for anybody who hasn't joined us before, basically what we do and why we do it. We are hoping to create an educational place for people to come, either students or current professionals who are looking to further their knowledge or hear about new things or different things that they may be able to get involved in or have done through sort of a variety of different experiences. One of the things that we love to do actually is this lecture series, and lots of people have made connections through it. We also have a fellowship showcase about wilderness medicine education, and we have tons of different things, but really we're just trying to create a place for everybody to be able to come together and learn about continuing education and different things that are happening and wilderness and emergency medicine. So if you haven't already done this, we would love for you to join our mailing list. This is where you will get the most up-to-date information about what's happening. Our biweekly lectures, other opportunities that we get notified about, we try to share with our community of people who are with us. Definitely, like I was talked about, the fellowship showcase and certification things that happen and giveaways that we sometimes do. The best thing to do is to join our mailing list to find out all of that information. And this is how you can also find us. We're on various platforms after today's lecture. If you got here late or you need to dip out early, you can go to YouTube, you can watch all of our lectures. I have gone back and watched ones that I wasn't able to attend because I was doing various things, and it's really interesting. So websites, social media, come find us. This is who makes this all possible. This is the board of people. We're, all students across the country who volunteer our time to do these things because we believe in it and we love to hear about what's happening. So if you're interested in joining our board, we will have elections coming up sort of in the beginning of the new year. And anybody who is interested would welcome. So without further ado, the real meat and potatoes of tonight, I'm excited to introduce you Dr. Ryan Stanton. He is an emergency room physician. He is based out of Kentucky. He's the EMS director for Lexington Fayette Union County. He's also the medical director for NASCAR safety team and for EMS agencies. He's the CMO, or he's the chief medical contributor to Fox 56 News. He's got a podcast. He's the president of communications for ASAP. It seems like there's almost no titles that this guy doesn't hold or now, or maybe has hold or will hold in the future. But he comes to us really from the beginning as an emergency medicine physician and from the University of Kentucky. And tonight we are so excited to hear about a piece of medicine that people don't always think of at the top of their head when they think about medicine, but it's totally makes 1,000,001 sense why emergency physician would be at the backseat of NASCAR helping people do things. So I will stop sharing and I will let us get to the real interesting piece of tonight.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. Just looking at that picture from there was the first picture from the board of directors for ASAP when I joined just right before COVID, and I've got a lot more gray now than I did then. So I'm going to blame COVID, maybe the board, maybe a little bit of everything, but it's one of those exciting things. So let me get us started here with our slideshow. It should be coming up. Play from the beginning. Let's see if it's going to go with that. There we go. Perfect. So playing in traffic, the evolution of motorsports medicine. And this is a topic, and I'll talk a little bit more as we get going about why emergency medicine, because I think that's an important thing to keep in mind here, is because emergency medicine, whether it's outside the emergency department, almost anywhere. The thing I like to say is when they say on an airplane, is there a doctor on the plane? They're not looking for a podiatrist. They're looking for an emergency physician, and that is kind of the hopes of having that there. And we have wonderful opportunities as emergency physicians, and I can talk about that here in a little bit more in terms of why that's the case. but it plays into all types of things outside the hospital. With the interest here in wilderness-based medicine, that is very much an area where emergency physicians are the growing go-to for that, just because of our skill set and abilities as physicians. No disclosures at this point. I wish there was more, but there is not near enough. So what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight is the review of the evolution of the motorsport safety team in medicine, explore the balance of entertainment and safety, because I think that's a really important consideration when you start getting into these realms. You look at any sporting realm, or even into concerts or whatever, it's a balance between entertainment and safety, why emergency medicine matters, and then looking how that may translate to others in this case. So this is actually Bristol Motor Speedway in East Tennessee from the mid 1980s. And this was my first exposure to NASCAR racing. We just moved up there from Atlanta, Georgia. My dad was a vascular surgeon, wanted to live somewhere within 5 minutes of his workplace and not Atlanta, which was 20 miles and 2 hours each direction. And so we moved to this small little area. And you actually, on the right side of the screen, just behind that little green mountain right there, is more bleachers. And if you wore your Boy Scout uniform, you got to go to the races for free. And so I ended up going to one of the lower series races that night for free. Just the smells, the sights, the sounds, the people, just everything about it. I fell in love. In fact, that night, a tire hit. Just there, you see the little red Marlboro giant tobacco box right on the bottom part of the track there. Just to the right of that's a gate. And a tire went over that, rolled down that hill, and hit a Corvette that was parked at the very bottom of the hill there amongst all those white trucks down there. And I thought this was me. I wanted it. I loved it, and went there for about every race for about 20 years, just as a fan, and thought, there's not a chance. And then ended up moving to Lexington, Kentucky, and that got opportunity there to what we do now, which is the medical director of the AMR NASCAR safety team. I've got a team that will be traveling tomorrow that'll be heading to Miami, Florida, to the Homestead Miami race. Then we have Martinsville, and then I'll be heading out to Phoenix for the season finale down there at Phoenix Raceway. So, it's the opportunity now from being that person who's sitting up there in the stands, just thinking about how cool to me the sport was and everything about it. I mean, just maybe because the ADD of emergency that turned me into emergency medicine was the same ADD that this entire thing just kind of saturated those senses as I went. And so it's been a good journey. We'll talk about that because it started here. I mentioned the East Tennessee already. Then I moved to Lexington, Kentucky. My wife's an internal medicine pediatrics physician. I was a year ahead of her in school, and so I did a year of surgery there at East Tennessee State because there was only 6 things to choose from, and as a proper emergency medicine mindset, 5 of those sounded awful. So I did a year of surgery and enjoyed it. They wanted me to stay. I said, no way. My wife said, I agree, no way. And so we moved up to Kentucky. And I don't know how many people realize Kentucky is not a racing state. It is about basketball, and almost everything is about basketball. And for about 2 weeks a year, we act like we're about football, and then we go back to being about basketball again. So I moved up here. I had a year of residency, and so they said, "Hey, we know you like racing. We do Kentucky. We staff Kentucky Speedway up in northern Kentucky. It's kind of in between Cincinnati, Lexington, and Louisville. And you've done a year of surgery, so you can get your resident license and you can come help." So starting in 2005, fall of 2005, I started going up there and working those tracks. And then for about 8 or 10 years through University of Kentucky, worked those tracks at Kentucky Speedway. Then I left the University of Kentucky and went out into community medicine. And a friend of mine through the American College of Emergency Physicians was the medical director for Talladega Superspeedway. And so he invited me down, said, get your Alabama license and you can come down here. I did that for about 4 years. Loved it. It's the pinnacle, and everything about Talladega Nights it's just about accurate. So you can watch that movie if you want to do some background studying on the program and what we do and the personalities and how things work. And then 8 years ago, they came up with this plan. The drivers had asked for it for years, for a traveling safety team. And because I had a couple of the states, 3 state licenses with Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama, all of which are NASCAR states, I was asked to try out for the team. So I tried out for the team, which basically means you showed up and you didn't get us fired, and got invited to continue with that. And then 5 years ago, became medical director of the team. Since then, we've added more series. We have IMSA, we have SRX, we have USF. SRX kind of went by the wayside. They shut down, but USF is the training series or minor leagues for IndyCar. So it's open wheel. So we have a lot, and our teams, GMR Motorsports, um, we have the teams that we have with my side that does everything, including the IMSA, NASCAR, USF, and then these extra series. And then we have a separate team that does IndyCar. Everybody always wants to ask us about Formula One, since they just were down in Texas at COTA and have a few races here in the US. We've talked to them, but nothing's panned out thus far. We're not on the same page with regard to what our expectations. But I got a number of friends that work for Formula One when they come here to the United States, and so of course support them. Any type of racing, so we support each other. But what's next? Who knows? I mean, when I started in residency here, when I started at Kentucky Speedway, when I started at Talladega, this job didn't even exist. So how can you think about something that's not going to exist? And I'll talk about a little bit more once we get into it. Some of the things that as young physicians, how you position yourself for these types of roles, even if it doesn't exist yet. You don't know what's going to be out there. So this was Bristol back in the day when they've got enough people that they could do these card stunts and everything. The last time they were able to do that with enough people was actually at the football game with Virginia Tech and Tennessee. They've got a baseball game between the Braves and Cincinnati Reds coming up next year, and that'll sell out. So they'll do another one of those again. My little house there in Lexington, Kentucky, we bought with 2 resident salaries, but I took a year off. So we tried to pay for it for 1 year. And so my fun that I thought I was going to have on my year off consisted of selling baseball cards and football cards to try to make ends meet while watching Spanish soap operas and horse racing. So that's about as much fun as it can be right there. I've changed a little bit since working the NCAA tournament for the University of Kentucky. I had me a cool goatee back then and lighter colored hair, and none of it was gray. Thankfully, I survived that part. This was the Infield Care Center at Kentucky Speedway. This is a lot of what we do. As you can see in the background there, the flight crew is stretched out, taking a nap. Everybody else is looking like they're working, but nobody really is. And until the wrecks start to happen, nobody really does too much of anything unless the weather's terrible and then the fans start coming in. Very few people know at Talladega and Daytona, the track is so steep and so wide, they actually have rappelling crews that come down. If a car gets stuck at the top, they actually have rappelling crews that come down from the top. On those tracks, we actually have to get out the window of the truck. We don't open the door because if you let the door slam, the truck will slide down the track. It's about a 30-degree angle at that point. And of course, my coffee maker has decided it's going to shut itself off right now. So we're going to give it a little bit of grace and hope it's done. Yes, it is. This was the initiation of the safety team. This was my first race that I worked at Bristol Motor Speedway. NASCAR hated the pants because we were dressed like the asphalt. They thought we were going to just become a hood ornament. So that was the last year we had black pants for our safety team. But we kept the red, white, and blue after that. My wife and I, this was my first race as the medical director of the AMR NASCAR safety team at the Daytona 500. And the big thing about that race that day is it ended up getting rained out after about 4 laps or so, and we watched it from the next day from home, and that was the big wreck. And I thought that we had actually killed the driver on my first race as medical director, and thought I was going to be the shortest tenure in the history of motorsports. This is with the SRX safety team on one of our dirt tracks that we went to. This was actually in Iowa, Knoxville, Iowa, and great time that happened for a couple of years. And now with this was at the Roval with Kevin Harvick, who backed in the wall on fire. And I was trying to convince him to get out, and the firefighter sprayed me with Purple K, which is a fire retardant extinguisher from the other side of the car. So that is not actually smoke from the fire. That is me getting sprayed with Purple K, the extinguisher. So it looks much more dramatic than it is. So why EM? So why is it us from my personal point of view? Most of us have a passion. The passion may not be motorsports, and for most, it's not motorsports. For me, that's what I love. I love communications. I love motorsports. I've been in media for 34 years now, started there before I went to college. But we still have our passions. We have a passion for taking care of people, no matter where they need to be taken care of. You know, that impact. Where do we impact people? Where can we care for people? Where there's a need? And of course, the gifts and skills that come with being board certified in emergency medicine and trained as the specialty that we are. And all of that comes together in what we do with these types of things, which allows us then to go out, and whether it's on top of a mountain, whether it's at concerts, whether it's on a cruise ship, wherever it may be, the ideal candidate is going to be emergency medicine. EMS and emergency medicine, we have this very close tie together with our interest, our personalities, and we really are the best suited for these types of environments where we're going to have large amounts of people and groups. In NASCAR, it used to be that you used to have neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons. In fact, the IndyCar safety team was the exact same, one of each. IndyCar, they had an orthopedic surgeon and a neurosurgeon. And then NASCAR was the first one to completely switch over and say your first contact for anybody within the industry for an infield care center has to be a board certified emergency physician or board eligible emergency physician. There's a couple of caveats. If you've practiced full-time emergency medicine for 5+ years, grandfathered in, those types of things, but it's emergency medicine. And the reason was that injuries weren't the number one thing that we're seeing. For NASCAR, they're on the road basically 38 out of about 50 weeks a year. And we do a lot of the things that they need, you know, that they have a child that's sick, they've got allergies, they've, you know, got a little abscess, they've got whatever it may be, we're dealing with it in the infield care center and on the track and in the DO lot or where the driver owner lot and where everybody hangs out. Because they're on the road so much, they need the services that you would expect from emergency medicine, urgent treatment, and primary care. And emergency medicine has been able to fill that and say, we can do all of this. If you're right now, I'm treating you with some Allegra and, you know, short bursts of steroids or whatever for your nasty allergies from being in a dirty hotel, or all of a sudden now you're in a car, you're in an accident, you have a displaced fracture, we can straighten, we can splint that, we can take care of it. Or the track, the fans. You know, when I was working at Talladega, we almost every day, we're flying somebody out for a heart attack or a stroke or a stabbing. So emergency medicine, it really is what we do. And the beauty is emergency medicine can be done almost anywhere around the world. So that common link of emergency docs, the directions of within emergency medicine and outside emergency medicine, to be with NASCAR, you have to still be working actively in an emergency department. They want us to keep our skills up in terms of emergency medicine, and then that outside of EM as well. Your three options outside that within your groups or department, EM inspired type roles that you may be. And then, of course, anything outside medicine, because emergency physicians are fantastic leaders in general, just because of our ability to stay calm, kind of keep an even keel, to turn chaos into some form of order. You know, I tell everybody that this voice and presentation that you get right now is the exact same one that you're going to get when we're a code or something's hitting the fan. Just because nothing gets better when people are freaking out. You know, you stay calm. What can we do? What are the problems we have? What are the tools we have? Let's pull those together to get the best outcomes that we possibly can. And so emergency medicine is great at that around the world, whether it's in business, whether it's in investments, whether it's in healthcare, wherever it may be. Emergency medicine is a sought after leadership opportunity. So it's good, and I hope that everybody looks into that. Why EM? You know, this profession positions us for our why, you know, finding our why. And that's what I like to talk about, is finding your why. What is the thing that drives you? It's the old saying that says the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. You know, I think there's multiple days you find out kind of that purpose why, but being able to find that and pursue it, you know, at foot in emergency medicine within your emergency department, but also then chasing down those passions. You know, surgeons, a lot of times, well, a lot of the other professions in medicine don't get that opportunity. They are this specialty here, and then if you want to do something else, it's completely separate. For us, it all kind of works together, especially for us within the EMS emergency medicine world, because it is so close, and we're trying to move the care closer and closer to the patient and where they are. And so that's a great segue into why we as emergency medicine have that opportunity. So if anybody remembers Talladega Nights, I talked about it. It is just like Scrubs with regard to, they say, what's the most accurate medicine show? Scrubs. There's not as much hanky-panky in the broom closets. But I mean, in terms of the rest of it, the weird interactions and all that type of stuff, it's the most accurate, at least my wife and I, when we used to watch a lot of those shows. But Talladega Nights, it's a great representation of what we deal with on the NASCAR side. But safety, it never was primary. And we still see this across the country. And that's why there's still opportunities for a lot of physicians out there, because a lot of tracks still see this idea that motorsports is dangerous and people are going to die. If you look here, you see the car, but if you look at the top left, there's a person. The driver is flying up near that light post. And there's somebody just still watching the car as the person flies over them. And it's hard to see that that's what it is, but there's a person, the driver's flying through the air, and they thought that that was the safest plan back then. And actually that was the argument when seatbelts started to really come about in the 70s and 80s, was the idea of it's actually safer to be thrown free from the car. Of course, now we know that's really kind of silly, but, at the same time, that's the type things that you're dealing with, the dogmas and the myths and the things that you're dealing with. And so safety never was a really big priority within motorsports until about the last 20 to 30 years. And you've seen advances, but not until the last, really, honestly, now, people say, what's the most common thing you see? Well, it's not injuries. It's actually other stuff. It's heat-related illness is my biggest issue in NASCAR, is heat-related illness, because air conditioning doesn't help a car go fast. So they're not going to put air conditioning inside that car because it's going to be weight, and it's not going to make it go any faster because there's a standard weight. And so the inside of those cars can be 120, 130, 140 degrees, and you're in it for 3 to 4 to 5 hours, 6 if it's the Coke 600. And so it's a very long time that you're in these sauna-based environments. And so heat-related illness is a legit concern for us. This was one of the very first ones, the car flying over the outside banking because there was no walls. There was nothing to keep the cars, within the track. As you see, again, the driver's being thrown from the vehicle. He's being thrown down. So what are the chances of that car, which at that point, that car is probably, 1.5 2 tons, is going to land on him, and it's going to be a bad day either way. But thankfully we've changed. So this is actually one of the very first seats inside a race car. This is when they truly were close to being stock cars. So NASCAR is considered stock car racing. The idea being that the car was, back in the day, one that could come off of the showroom floor, a couple of modifications, go out to the track. And it's how, Ford and Chevy and Oldsmobile would compete against each other, for their cars, who had the best and strongest and fastest muscle cars out there. Since then we've had some changes in the automakers, but, as you can see here, the safety, get a little roll of probably what is insulation for somebody's, pipe in their house. That's what they put on that seat to kind of hold them in on that side. Maybe a little rudimentary seat belt, probably aluminum piping down there on the bottom, the steel on the left side. Steering wheel is a rigid steering wheel there. It goes all the way down to the steering column, goes all the way down. It's not jointed. So if the front end of the car gets hit, it drives the steering wheel right into the driver. They're now jointed to where when the car is hit, it actually buckles the steering column and the wheel doesn't move. On the right is what we actually see now. Basically full surrounding. The top there is the head surround. That's designed to keep the head in place with very little movement. It tends to have somewhere between about 10 and 11 inches between the pads. Very restricted. Most of the drivers only want to have about an inch or so before their head actually hits that pad, just because of not wanting to restrict the movement. You have the rib protectors in the middle there where you see the Shriners Hospital Children's. Those are the rib protectors coming around the chest. Then you have the bottom aspect actually wraps around the legs, all the way around the legs. And then the steering column and the wheel. But you can imagine how difficult it would be if somebody's unconscious in order to be able to get them out of this vehicle. It protects them, and it's why we rarely see significant injuries anymore. But at the same time, it is considerations for us. This was actually the earliest photo I could find of a NASCAR interior. Those really didn't exist, pictures of the interior. This is basically probably an Oldsmobile, if I had to guess. I don't know. Somebody else may know if they can see something, but I believe we're just going to go with it. And you can see it's got the bench seat, got the kind of the turtle shell helmet there that's on the seat. There's nothing there that keeps them there except a lap belt. There's a lap belt, and NASCAR was actually very early adopters of helmets and seat belts. In fact, as soon as they started, they mandated the seat belts and helmets, but it was only a lap belt, and it was only a little half helmet that you'd see on some of these motorcycles. And it was these types of cars. It was a stock car that they drive around the tracks that they just do a little bit modifications to and take out the extra junk to get in there. This is what we see now. If you get into a car now, this is from when we first debuted the next gen car a couple of years ago. This is what the inside looks like. Each of those steel pipes is designed specifically for a type of load on the vehicle and a type of incident, to make sure that the driver compartment stays intact in even the most impressive incidents. And we'll show you one of them here shortly. But this is what the inside of the car looks like. And so when we're dealing with it from a medicine standpoint, it's how are we going to get access to them? How do we get to the driver, and what kind of care can we do while we're there? Each frame now is standardized. So this is the standard next gen frame. So every single car comes from a single frame maker. And the idea being that these frames has a middle section, a front section, and a back section. So where the front section, the front clip, and the back clip can be removed and be replaced, and then the middle section, which is the actual driver compartment. And they're all the exact same, and that is a steel door that's on there. But those holes you can see, the 3 holes on the left and the 3 holes on the right, those are actually designed for us to be able to cut. Those are our cut points, and so we can go in there with the tools and actually do the cuts there if we need to remove the door. Typically, what we would do is actually remove the roof and take it from the top. This was actually the initial medicine of motorsports. This is the IndyCar safety team and some of the pioneers, and this was the actual very first safety team, IndyCar safety team bus. So their mobile medical unit that would travel around with IndyCar. And this really was, IndyCar was the first ones to really drive motorsports in terms of being able to advance medicine and safety and respond on track. So NASCAR, we use local assets, firefighters, paramedics, physicians, nurses in the infield care centers, and some on the tracks. And then we have our safety team, which is a smaller safety team that works with track services. IndyCar brings the entire team with them, including the safety teams, some of the tow folks and other support are not necessarily traveling with them, but everybody on track that's doing work on the track is actually with their series. So here's how we kind of got where we are. Formula One, 1952 helmets were mandated. 1967 seat belts were mandated. And their first CMO was Dr. Sid Watkins in 1978. So you can see there, though, that if you look back at Formula One, they were racing in the early 1900s with some of their cars. So it wasn't until 1967 that they say, you know what, we should probably tie you into this vehicle. 1947 was IndyCar's first care center at IMS. It is actually still there. It is a fantastic and very large to serve 500,000 fans that are there. It almost runs like a city, like an emergency department. In fact, I believe, if I remember correctly, it is either the busiest or second busiest emergency department in Indiana for several days in a row. So that's not unusual at all. In NASCAR, 1948, seatbelts and helmets were required. 1970 is when they put in that first safety net, which is the net that goes up beside the driver that keeps the driver in and other stuff out. 2002 was when the Hans device was required. Before that, it was recommended, but it wasn't until the Daytona 500 in February of 2001 when Dale Earnhardt unfortunately lost his life at the end of that race, that shortly after that was when Hans devices were required. In fact, in the 2 weeks after his accident, more Hans devices were sold than were ever sold until that time, since it was invented. And then in 2002, NASCAR also opened R&D, research and development. It's a large facility testing various aspects, almost every aspect of the car and the performance. And even right now, they're working on advancements in helmets. It's located in Concord, North Carolina, pretty close to the actual track there, and is a really neat facility on where they test things. And then 2002 also was the safer barrier. This was based out of Nebraska. This is the barrier that's actually designed steel and foam, and it's designed to dissipate the energy of a crash. With trauma, the force is the length of that deceleration, and the more I can lengthen the deceleration, the less focal energy the driver or whoever has on them. So if you think about something before, all the walls were concrete, and so the car would hit it, and your only deceleration time was the compaction and the crush of the vehicle itself. Well, with the safer barrier, the whole thing can move in typically somewhere around 12 to 18 inches if it's hit hard enough. And then it dissipates that energy down the length of these steel beams. And it has made a huge difference. The first track to actually have those was the corners at Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 2002. So it wasn't even at that point a formal NASCAR track that started it. So evolution of the MD and DO, I talked about this a little bit. It used to be neurosurgeons, orthopedic surgeons, trauma surgeons that ran this, and now it is emergency physicians, and that's pretty universal across the spectrum of motorsports these days is the use and the utilization of emergency physicians. Now we have consultation with all of the above, and we travel with a neurologist for the head injury, which is a huge focus within all sports right now. But we have consultation with orthopedic surgeons and others that we will work with and help arrange follow-ups if necessary. But emergency physicians are the way to go. And then, of course, this has been a huge drive. The NFL's concussion crisis. And then if you look down below it, this 2013, this was before our team, which is 2017. NASCAR expands concussion protocol. So we actually have about 5 neurologists that rotate, and we work on the protocols, working on the exams that they do. Full exams, King Divics, which is one of the main tests initially for head injuries, looking at pupillometry. How do the pupils respond? And that's actually looks like it's going to be a good way to track recovery from concussions, is how well the pupils are responding, and it's not a test they can fudge like they can the King Divic. So looking at better testing and ways to pick up, and even now we're looking at these whole blood based tests that can be used to actually look for head injuries. And a lot of it's to pick up and protect them long term, but also protect the other drivers. And when you're driving a 3,600-pound car around, protecting the fans as well. We don't want somebody out there that is thinks they're Batman, and at 200 miles an hour with 3,600 pounds of car, and have the risk of a fan or spectator to be injured as well. So, concussion is very important to all of sports. NFL has kind of led the way just because they've been almost forced to because of the lawsuits and the focus that's on that. But with motorsports, it's been a very important drive, motivation for us as well, especially with some of our more significant participants and stars talking about the number of concussions that they had in the past. And then the challenge that we deal with is everything that we do is under a microscope. And it used to be the microscope of 50 television cameras, high definition television cameras that can zoom in on a quarter on the track a mile away, but also in front of, potentially a 250,000 fans, depending on the race. And if it's IndyCar, 500,000 at the Indy 500. And almost all of them, you see the young lady on the just to the right of the box there, who's got her phone pulled up. And as soon as we have a major crash, there is videos from every possible angle online. And I can tell you that everybody thinks they can do our job better than we can. Everybody has their thoughts, their opinions on what we need to be doing, how fast it needs to happen, what were we thinking. And so everything we do is under a microscope. So sometimes when I'm looking at my team and watching my team, if I'm not at the track, I'll be watching the race with the sound down, and then watching how they respond on track. and looking at those visual cues of how they present themselves when they get out of the truck, when they approach the car, when they're with the driver. And we actually train on these things, not just the medical aspect of it, because we look for folks that actually have the reps and the necessary skills anyway, but also so they can so we can train them to say, all right, here's what we're going to do, to where not only do you know what you're doing, but we're going to make sure that it's part of the show as well, to make sure that we are communicating your skill level as you're on the track. And so understanding that when you're in these public spheres in influence, they have now just as many cameras, if not more, capabilities to get you on film as the TV crews. Even with the TV, they really don't know what we do. They really don't know our skill levels, and they don't know what we're going to be addressing at the track. And so that's always a very important consideration for us. But, the blessing is, with all the cameras, it also gives us a lot of ways in order to reassess and look at crashes, looking at scene recoveries, looking at responses, because if we have a major crash within an hour or so of the end of the race, maybe sooner, we will have everything down to the second. Of the first medic was at the window in 17 seconds. The physician was at the window in 33 seconds. This is what happened. The driver was out in 53 seconds, or whatever it is. We actually have it down to the second in terms of the response, because this is what we deal with on occasion. So this was at Daytona. That's the number 3 of Austin Dillon. Got up into the fence. The fence has actually changed quite a bit. And you can see on the right side of the fence, there's wires, large steel cables. They're actually designed to catch the cars and keep them inside the track. The netting, which is fencing that's over that, is actually designed to keep smaller pieces out. The challenge with this one is the engine actually ended up on the sidewalk or the catwalk that's right in front of the stands there. And there was a couple, there was some debris that got up into the stands, but thankfully, driver did well and everything went fine. This is our worst nightmare for a lot of reasons, but the fence technology is now so much to keep the cars inside the track and the pieces of the car outside the track, even though not everything is perfect. And we're dealing with stars. I mean, we're dealing with folks that, as they always tell us in our meetings, support the show, don't become the show, because it's not your show. So whether it's whether it's these drivers, whether it's Verstappen, whether it's Helio Castroneves, who's honestly the nicest guy that's ever walked the planet, whether it's Dale Earnhardt on the bottom right there, or whether it's the stars of today, the Ryan Blaney's, the Hamlins, and the Bushes that are there. This is their show, this is their sport, and we are interacting with them in that sport, and they are just as competitive as you would expect with any professional athlete, because they are. Their skill set is just incredible. And at any given moment, for a lot of these participants, they may not have another contract. It may be the end of their career if something happens. And so it's not always the most positive interactions. So support the show. Don't become the show. That's one of our big balance points, is making sure that we are present and we're there at the window as soon as possible. We're not to be seen. But as soon as somebody wrecks, people start asking, if it's 15, 20 seconds, where's the safety team? And so making sure that we are integrated within the show, but not becoming the show. And so, if you watch, you can kind of see a lot of that stuff. When one of the drivers decides to go up on the track and show his displeasure to another driver, we'll stand back, we'll stay behind our block, meaning another vehicle between us and the other vehicles. If they want to get hit by the car, that's fine. The only thing worse than one person getting hit is 2 people getting hit. The only thing worse than 2 people getting hit is when one of them was supposed to save the other one. So we don't want anybody getting hit by cars, but we definitely don't want it to be the rescue team. This is actually the end of Daytona a few years ago. This was an Xfinity car got up into the fence there at the end. So after we'd gotten the drivers out, made sure everybody was in, I crawled through the fence. So that's me on the other side of the fence in the red, white, and blue. That's some of the firefighters. And we were checking to make sure everybody had been checked on and was clear. What I didn't realize, if you look 2 people behind me, the guy with his back to me that's in the gray sweatshirt and the black hat, that's Michael Jordan. Somebody didn't tell me that until later, that said, "Hey, did you meet Michael Jordan?" I was like, "No, I didn't even know he was there." It's like, "Yeah, you were like 20 feet from him." So yeah, we got a little bit of tunnel vision. I just made sure everybody was checked out all right. I guess I didn't check him that close, but I made sure they had checked him. So enough done there. They actually found a piece of the car wedged in the air intake of one of the buses that's off to the left the next morning. Thankfully, it was the bus and not us, or one of the participants. All right, so this is actually when people say, what do we prepare for? This is that first crash I was talking about, that first race that I had as medical director. Let's see if it's going to play. There we go. So that's Ryan Newman. So he's over upside down. So this is one where I was sitting at home. I'm already starting to text my team. Some of them are on the infield. He comes to a rest here. I thought, if you look to the right, I thought this was fuel that was leaking out, but it's actually oil. So thankfully it doesn't catch fire more than it is right there. Yeah, if you look there just to the right, you can see something pouring out. I thought that was fuel. It's actually oil. But he's there on his side. And they, of course, what I was talking about, they focus in on it just to make us all panic. Because now you've got something running down underneath the car. That's going to be the fire. That's the firefighters, the fire truck, the tow truck. They immediately back up to the side of the car in the position to get the car rolled over. That's our safety team. That's Dale, one of our paramedics. The smaller guy there, he's in the window right there checking on the driver. They actually mentioned the AMR safety team. A lot of the other teams come out there. I can tell you what, a gas man and a jack man are not going to do us any good with rescuing a driver from a vehicle. But I want you to look at this, the design of why the design of the cars is important, because we assume that when somebody wrecks, it's going to be front end, side, back. But this is an important one to look at, because this is where the bars come into play. That's my other medic there on the left. That's the official. Our doc is there now. But watch right. They're going to do slow motion here. When he rolls up, here it is right here. When he rolls up, the top of the car and the driver compartment is facing down the track when this car comes and hits him right there. And you see the car flex. So he hit him upside down right over the driver's compartment. And luckily, one of the bar that the driver in here, he's actually has a master's. He's a engineer, and he actually designed that bar that probably saved his life. But he thankfully he walked out of the hospital 2 days later with his kids, interestingly without shoes on, which all I could think about is how dirty the hospital floor was, but he apparently did okay, so I'm not worried about it. But the reality of what we see is this is the heat. These drivers at the end of these races are just completely wiped out. AJ Allmendinger after the race and that's one of our medics right there. And actually that team member just yelled, "We need the AMR safety team medic." And he didn't realize he was actually already in front of them. So we actually wear our fire suits now on pit road so that they can actually see us and recognize that we're the same people. But we actually created a program called the wellness checks. It was initially the heat plan, and then checking out these drivers at the end of every single race because of how wiped out they can be, especially if their cooling suits, which is a shirt that they wear, is not functioning properly. And sometimes it gets real hot. This is what happens at one of two places where we've raced where they had to have a muffler and they didn't attach it properly, so it caught the foam inside the door on fire. Thankfully, he got out just fine, and in fact, they raced that car later that night. They just cleaned it up, put some new plastic and foam in it, and put it back on track. So the inside of a car fire doesn't mean you can't drive it again. This is actually my view from the back of my truck. This is one time they had us be the pace vehicle because the pace car got blocked in for a wreck. And so I'm just looking out the back of my truck and watching the cars behind me line up as we go. So it's all pretty fun. And this is the environment of our drivers. I mentioned earlier how they're surrounded. You can actually see ice. The top of his fire suit there where it's unzipped, that's actually a bag of ice that's stuffed down in the top of his suit. But, this tight fit in here with their clothing, their Nomex, their belts, and the seats. Because as you can see here, the top left, the inside of the car, 154 degrees, 111 on the top right, 124 on the bottom right. The Indianapolis 500 track temperature of 121 degrees on track. I actually had a 140 track temperature down in COTA with USF, and even open wheel, they were getting hot. And so this is a lot of what we're dealing with. And this is one reason emergency medicine matters. A driver that's just completely wiped out. This is our initial medical director, Dr. Angie Feed. She's now the assistant director of IndyCar that's there on the left, and she still does races with us. So this is the parts of emergency medicine, that balance of where we are as a team in translating what we do in the hospital and translating that to the track environment on an ongoing basis. And so it's kind of neat how it happens and how we blend the two together. But it helps keep me sane. And we're always practicing for the big one, because this is what fans want to see. They want to see these cars get upside down, tumble all over the place. And we want it to be entertaining, and we want it to be fun. We just want everybody to walk away in the end and be all right. So with that being said, coming out of the smoke, that's the end, and I appreciate it. Contact ryan.a.stanton@gmail.com on the Twitter machine. Actually, it's X. I should have changed it to X, darn. @EverydayMed. Insta, I'm Ryan the Tall. And then the ASAP Frontline podcast that we release every single week. So I'd love you to join and take a listen to that, as well as we do some of our community emergency medicine-based education. And wilderness medicine is actually a very common topic that we deal with. One of my favorite go-tos is Dr. Ben Mattingly, who does a lot of his wilderness medicine retreats here locally in Kentucky as well. Even though it's not very wilderness here. Here they stay at a nice house and do bourbon tours. But that could be wilderness enough. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and give you a couple minutes if you want to ask questions. Stop share. There we go.
I'd like to first to say thank you. It's just so interesting to learn about this stuff. It's definitely I see occasionally races or something like that, but definitely don't think about it in terms of medicine. And I think that's one of the great things about this is thinking about the medicine component of something that you sort of become just, used to seeing without thinking that. If anybody wants to ask questions, I have questions, but I'll hold them. Until in the chat, people can ask, or just unmute yourselves, whatever people feel comfortable with.
Okay, I saw that chat pop up, and that was you just letting us know if anybody has one. And you mentioned the medicine on track, and for me, everybody said, "Are you nervous out there?" It's like, no, I'm actually not. It's actually much less stressful than in my emergency department, because out here it's a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds that are very healthy, that know what they got themselves into, that volunteered to be out there, getting paid very well to be out there, a lot of them. Whereas the emergency department, I may have 5 or 6 people over age 85 with dementia that can't give me their stories, that have 500 comorbid conditions, and everything's going on at the same time, and the staffing and the boarding and the overcrowding and everything else. So for me, this is the night race at Daytona. To me, it's almost relaxing to be out there. And I think that's the beauty of finding that passion, that why, that area that you love, is that it really isn't work at that point. I mean, it's work in terms of the fact you're away from home, you have commitments, there's expectations. But, for me, the hardest part of this is just the travel. It's not the being on track. It's not dealing with fans or drivers or everything else. It really is just being away from home.
Well, I actually have a medicine question, which is, you said that heat stroke is one of the primary things that seems to be a very prevalent issue for all of the drivers and stuff like that. And I'm wondering about if you do any sort of pre-hydration regimens for these guys to help with bizarre electrolyte imbalances as a result of this. Also, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that a lot of the racers do get Foleys because they're in there for so many hours. Is there any other sort of IV lines or things that happen in the race to sort of combat those things
If it's really hot, some can have access to the infield care center and get IVs. They don't do Foleys. If there's one thing about driving, but what they're not afraid to do is just pee in their seat. It's going to be very wet, and some of that's sweat, and some of it's not. We've had them vomiting. We've had them with GI illnesses, gastroenteritis. We had norovirus go through a year or so ago. That was awful. That's when we very much volunteer the local folks to carry the drivers into the care center. But with that, a lot of it is that preparation, and most of them, especially the high-end teams, they will have a program on things they're prepping. They're prepping the entire week. Most of them don't drink alcohol during the season. Most of them have a very significant fitness regimen that they're going through. But I had one and I think this was at, I can't remember where it was. It may have been at Gateway in St. Louis, which is actually on the Illinois side. And they said, we need help at this car. And I went up there and he says, I mean, I'm spasming. I can't get out of the car. He's like, and so I'm like, all right, I'll help you get out. Let's get you out. And he was just cramping up really bad. And it had been a really hot day. And he's like, well, I hydrate, man. I drink a ton. It's like before every single race, I drink like 2 gallons of water. It's like, wait, what? He's like, 2 gallons of water. And it's like, okay, let's go into the care center, and then we're going to have education on proper pre-race hydration, electrolyte balanced hydration. So liquid IV is very popular, and a lot of other preparations that are there. And most of the high-end teams there, they do a really good job. But you'll get some of these, I mean, these low-end teams, the drivers will spend the summer driving from track to track with the windows up and no air conditioning on, just to condition themselves for the track. So they'll actually drive on purpose with no air conditioning, with their windows up, from track to track, just to kind of get acclimated to it. So they're acclimated to it in a way that's very different than most of us probably are. But a lot of the tracks, I'm actually speaking on the specific thing on the heat related illness among fans and participants at the annual NASCAR conference in January in Daytona. And we're actually going to be the closing keynote. It's going to be on that and some of the cool things tracks have done to alleviate that, including having municipal buses there, dunk tanks, tents, all these things to help protect people from the elements, because the majority of the season is when it is way too hot.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Well, now I can refute people when they tell me that they have Foley's, and all these drivers have Foley's, and because that's what I
I've never
pictured.
seen one with a Foley so far. They're too
I'll
afraid of
take
it.
that as gospel for now.
Yeah, they're afraid of needles too. I mean, they're super afraid of needles, almost as much as somebody who's covered head to toe with tattoos. That's the universal. The drivers, almost universally, they can drive 200 miles an hour and hit a wall, but a needle is across the line.
Does anybody else have any questions or anything, comments? People are feeling a little quiet tonight. Well, there's not any other questions. I just want to say thank you so much. That was really interesting. And I don't know, just hearing the stories and things like that, it's great. And I'm applying to emergency medicine, so I'm very thankful to hear about all these opportunities. So, thanks so
The
much.
field is always growing. That's the beauty of it. The field is always growing. The opportunities are growing. And, just always the beauty of once you get done with medical school and then residency is the guardrails go way out. And, it really is the career you want to make. And I think that's a great opportunity for all of us moving forward. But it's kind of it may not be the heyday for in-house emergency medicine because of insurers and boarding and staffing, but it's going to be the heyday for event-based medicine, wilderness medicine, and austere environments for emergency physicians.
Exactly. So cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. So interesting. And I can't wait to see what else you're a part of in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. And thanks for the invite. And anybody has any questions or wants to come check out our race, just get in touch. I love getting EM docs out there to the track and then watch their eyes when the cars crank up and the smells start up and all the senses.
Awesome.